Are there any hands raised for public comments? Do you
Hey, Chair
see?
Banker, this is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. I see one individual with their hand raised at this time, and that is Richard Bamber.
Okay. Um, so Richard, if you would like to, uh, Mr. Bamberg, if you would like to go ahead and speak and you've got 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you very much, Chair Banker, for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to make comments as related to the proposal to procure 5 over-the-road coaches. RTD's 2013 over-the-road coach fleet comprised of 54 vehicles that were placed into service from 2013. The vehicles have been great. They've served RTD well, but as the federal limits are starting to approach, they do need replacing. So my question is while 5 new buses are always going to be welcome, perhaps the directors might like to question what the plans are to replace the other 49. Certainly, if you look at the fleet transition plan, it actually shows no bus procurement for 2026, although it did show 57 for last year and I believe 166 diesel buses for 2027. Secondly, I sent a YouTube video link around to all of you earlier on today, showing you the latest motor coach industries. It's the D45, CRT, LE, and LE stands for low entry. This bus is the bus that if you are in a wheelchair or an ADA mobility device, is the overroad coach you have been waiting for. And so I think the question needs to be asked, has that model been considered? Because the benefits to the ADA upgrade and the speed of boarding that the second door will offer are absolutely going to fit very well with the routes that these buses are anticipated to be used on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bamberg. I did watch the video. It was very interesting. I see I have Director Guzman.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we recognize Director Rusha. She is present. They are present, excuse me.
Yes, she did text me. For the meeting notes, please note that Dr. Rusha has Director Rusha has joined us. I'm sure she might like the new title of Dr. Rusha. Okay, so thank you very much. Let's see. Mr. Kroll, do we have anyone else that is interested in speaking?
Committee Chair Banker, at this time, there are no further individuals present who desire to provide public comment.
Okay, and do we have any email comments?
There was one email comment, and it was from Mr. Bamber on the topic he just spoke of.
Okay. Okay, so then with no other participants in the queue, we will close the public comment period at this time. So the next section, item C, information from external entities. There are no external entity reports today. So we will move on to recommended actions, and there are 3 that we will be discussing today. So the first action is for approval of the 2026 Finance and Planning Committee Work Plan. We are asking for a motion to approve the 2026 committee work plan. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Rusha.
Okay, thank you, Director Geisinger and Director Rusha, first and second. I also want to thank Vice Chair Cindy Arcuri, the committee, GM CEO Johnson, CFO Mackey,
Noise removal is on.
Board Office Executive Manager Jack Kroll, in developing a very good work plan. I think it's still a living document, but I think we're going to have a lot of good topics for the rest of this year. I do want to flag a couple of items in addition to the work plan this evening. There's just 2 things that I just wanted to quickly mention. If you've had a chance to take a look at the work plan. Mr. Kroll, are you trying to pull that up?
I can pull it up.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. The first thing that I wanted to mention is that probably around June, perhaps July at our Finance Committee meeting, we would like to take a look and see if there would be any necessary budget changes that the entire board might want to do a budget amendment for. And the second item would be sometime in the next couple of months, we would like to discuss a long-term, perhaps a 5-year or 10-year capital plan. Probably, I'm guessing around our July meeting, so that'll be ready for the 2027 budget. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for further discussion, both on the two additions I just mentioned and the work plan that you have in front of you. If you've got any questions, please raise your virtual hands and I will call on you in turn. Any questions or comments? Any comments? If you've had a chance to take a look at it. Okay, I don't see any comments. So all those in favor, I'm assuming, well, maybe I should ask, are there any no votes? Okay, so with that, it passes. Everyone has voted yes. So the next action item that we have for tonight, let's see, is an approval for over-the-road coach procurement. So this would be for the board to authorize the general manager and CEO or her designee to enter into a contract with Motor Coach Industries, that's MCI, to purchase 5 45-foot over-the-road coaches for a total not to exceed cost of $5,118,551 or $1,023,710 per vehicle. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Rusha.
Second, Guzman.
Okay, Director Rusha, motion first and Director Guzman motion second. So I would like to then ask Greg Smith, Deputy Chief Operations Officer, Bus Operations, to present this item to the committee. And for those directors who have questions or wish to speak, to raise your virtual hands and I'll call you in turn. Mr. Smith, are you ready to make a presentation for us?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Banker.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. As introduced, I'm Greg Smith, Deputy COO of Bus here at RTD. The action item before you this evening is for the approval to enter into a contract with Motor Coach Industries for the purchase of the 5 over-the-road coach buses. This purchase supports the replacement of existing buses that were placed into service in 2013 and have since exceeded their useful life. In preparation for this purchase, staff applied for and RTD was awarded a CDOT Faster grant in the amount of $3 million. This grant is for the purchase of the 5 over-the-road coaches, with RTD contributing just over $2 million for a total not to exceed amount of about $5.1 million. For this procurement, RTD will be participating in the Washington State Transit Bus Cooperative Master Contract. The advantage of this option versus a standard procurement includes predetermined pricing and a lowered administrative time, which yields a more expedient bus turnaround. The buses are scheduled to go online during Q4 of 2026 and have a current lead time of approximately 4 months. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Any questions from the committee? Anyone? Director Guzman.
Thank you. Excuse me. I would like to know some information about, and I don't expect any kind of commitments here, but I would like to know some information about how we plan to proceed with this purchase and keep in line with state expectations for fleet transition, what that might look like and what's possible with this acquisition. I don't want to end up in a situation where we had before. I know we don't know what we don't know, but expectingly for this conversation, I went and looked at MCI for information about what they offer. And so are we, as part of this agreement with the Washington Group and the ability to purchase there, are we going to consider alternative propulsion systems as we do this work?
Mr. Smith?
Yes, I would of course defer to GM CEO Johnson if I don't cover this adequately, but we can certainly get that information for you. Traditionally, we have all configurable bus options are still available with the Washington State Co-op, but we will certainly look into the items that you brought up.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I have one more question.
Yes, go.
Thank
Go
you.
for it.
The financial impact says funding in the amount of $2,118,551, which leaves a balance to the grant that we received. What's the intention for the rest of the money, the remainder there?
Mr. Smith, would you like to answer that, or?
I would probably phone a friend and Mrs. Mackey.
Okay, CFO Mackey, would you like to talk to that question?
Yes, could we follow up on that specifically and get you a better answer after the meeting?
I'd be okay with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do understand it is in our capital budget that was approved, I believe, in 24. And it's fortunate that we now have a $3 million grant. So that's really good news. Director Arcuri, you have a comment, question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Sometimes, when you team up with somebody else, you don't have a lot of control over the arrangements or the agreement. I was just wondering what types of risks might we be at risk for by joining in with this Washington State Pact?
Okay, good question. Mr. Smith, would you like to answer that?
Sure. And again, actually, I think I may have a lifeline here.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, oh,
CEO
sorry, Madam.
Johnson, yes,
no, I
please.
was going to say, please go ahead. I was just going to talk about general, collective procurements, but did you want to add anything?
No, I think you were going down the similar road, so I would defer to you.
Okay. So, if I may, Madam Chair.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank
CEO
you.
Johnson.
Vice Chair Arcuri, thank you very much for your question. This is a very pertinent topic because for all intents and purposes, when we look at the bus manufacturing industry within the United States, typically we encounter greater risk by doing it by ourselves as a sole entity, as opposed of leveraging sort of this cooperative agreement going forward, because we get better pricing as we go down this path. Quite naturally, we will have a say in relationship to what it is that we need. But more to the point, considering that we're only looking to procure 5 buses, we get a better bang for the buck as we move forward. And it's more expedient in reference to doing a bus bill, because with the over-the-road coaches that are customarily used for any intercity type transportation, this tends to yield us a better product as we go forward, because traditionally these aren't as customizable as one would do with a standard transit bus as we move forward. So I would say, in sum, to answer your question, that the risk and exposure to the agency is minimal because all of the different aspects are outlined going forward, and then recognizing we wouldn't be the sole entity in reference to procuring these vehicles. We are better together in reference to having other entities in alignment with us. Should we encounter an issue such as a warranty and things of that nature, we wouldn't be in it alone.
Okay. Thank you, CEO Johnson. Director Arcuri, do you have another question?
Nope, not right now. Thanks.
Okay. Well, your hand is up. Any other?
Oh, I'm
questions or
sorry.
comments?
Lower hand.
No. One, I do want to thank our staff for looking and achieving a $3 million grant. This is excellent news. That saves us $3 million from our budget. I did watch the video that Mr. Bamberg sent us, and I will say I found it really interesting. Perhaps in the future, we might be able to look in an electric vehicle. I would be curious to find out what the cost difference would be. This particular procurement, it looks like we're going to be spending just over about $1 million per vehicle. I would be very curious to find out how much an electric vehicle over-the-road coach would be. I don't know, Mr. Smith, whether or not you had a chance to see the video. If not, we can certainly send it to you. I'm sure you're aware of it. So this was the first time I saw a vehicle of this kind. Director Guzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, one more question. What are these vehicles used for within our entire system? We have multiple buses going in multiple directions. Are these for any particular service provision that we provide? Are they meant for a specific corridor or to provide a certain type of service? Just curious.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Chair Banker. Director Guzman, that's a great question. These buses are the unbranded buses, so to speak. So they're not branded as like the FF service complement. So they are assigned to a variety of different routes. That's about as basic as I can put it.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to vote? Are there any no votes on this measure? Okay, with that, it passes 7-0. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is, oh, thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Have a good evening. Next item is the salary trust appointee for the Board of Directors to approve resolution series. We'll have a number later, 2026, appointing Greg Smith, Deputy Chief Operations Officer for the bus division, with a term expiring December 31st, 2027, to the Salaried Employee Defined Benefit Pension Plan Trust and the Salaried Employee Defined Contribution Plan Trust. Do we have a motion? I need a motion, please. In a second.
So moved, Guzman.
Okay, Director Guzman. And second was Director Kuchenritter?
That's right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to ask CFO Kelly Mackey to present this item to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Banker, and good evening, everyone. Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer. This item, as you mentioned, is a recommended action to approve a resolution series of 2026 appointing Greg Smith, our Deputy Chief Operations Officer of BUS, as a trustee with a term expiring December 31, 2027 on the Salaried Employee Defined Benefit Pension Plan and the Salaried Employee Defined Contribution Retirement Plan, effective April 1st, 2026. Mr. Smith will be replacing Mr. Bill Soroy, Senior Manager, Transit-Oriented Communities, who is departing RTD after this month. This action will retain a body of 7 trustees. I would like to thank Mr. Soroy for his service on these trusts, as he has been an effective and valuable chair. I look forward to the contributions that Mr. Smith will make on the boards of trustees. And Chair Banker, I will now turn it back to you.
Hey, thank you. Any comments, questions? Okay, with that, let's go for a vote. Are there any no votes? Okay, with that, it passes 7-0. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so those are the items that we need to vote on tonight. The next items are discussion items. So we're going to start with the 2025 year-end performance. So we now have final numbers closing out fiscal year 2025. And our CFO, Kelly Mackey, you will be leading us through the presentation and showing us how we ended last fiscal year. So thank you.
Yes, of course. Let me share my screen. All right, good evening. This is again Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer. And tonight I'll present preliminary unaudited 2025 year-end results, what we see before the audit closes and before the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR, is finalized. This is part of our commitment to transparency and to giving the committee an early factual readout on performance. I'll cover 3 things: a brief background and purpose, an executive summary of 2025, and then the drivers: revenue, boardings, working capital, expenses, and net position. First is background and purpose. RTD operates on a January through December fiscal year, and the objectives of this presentation are to provide transparency, overview of variances, and a preview of opportunities for 2026. The agency publishes monthly unaudited financial statements in the board briefings and on our financial information webpage. We also post the fiscal policy and annual transit asset management plan. The audited ACFR follows later once year-end adjustments and the external audit are complete. And tonight's data aligns with those public sources. Here I'll provide an executive summary. For top-line results, revenue was $1.3 billion, up 17% year over year, but $89 million or 7% below budget. Sales and use tax revenue grew 1.3%, but trailed budget by $34 million, due primarily to use tax, construction starts, and permitting that did not materialize from projections. Operating expense with depreciation exceeded revenue and was $1.3 billion, up 9% year over year, and $249 million, or 16% favorable to budget due to active expense management and timing of project starts. The preliminary bottom line change in net position was a $227 million decrease, 20% better than 2024, and $163 million, or 42% better than budget. Boardings were $65 million, down 30 basis points year over year, but encouragingly up 4.3% in the second half of 2025 versus the second half of 2024. Overall, RTD spent less than planned, revenue grew, and change in net position improved against budget and prior year. Now I will overview more detailed results. The first view of revenue performance here shows 2024 actuals in the first numerical column, followed by 2025 actuals in gray, and then 2025 budget. Then is a view of change from prior year and change from budget, with a better view as a positive change and worse as negative change. In the gray column, fair revenue of $61 million declined 4% from prior year and was 7% favorable to budget, aided by fair policy implementation and program renewals. Advertising, rent, and other operating revenue of $2 million grew 34% from prior year and missed budget by 76%. Sales and use tax revenue of $869 million grew 1.3% from prior year, but was 4% below budget. As I said, primarily due to tax growth projections that did not materialize in use tax. Operating grants of $232 million were $179 million higher than in 2024, but below budget by $97 million due to timing. East Colfax Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT, grant revenue was $72 million in 2025 versus a total budget of $178 million, and the remaining will carry forward into 2026. Investment income of $61 million grew 5% and was $25 million, or 68% favorable to budget from portfolio appreciation amid interest rate declines and a stronger net position. In total, 2025 revenue of $1.3 billion grew $182 million, or 17% from prior year, and missed budget by 7%. Here is a visual representation of revenue trends going back to 2019, so you can see over the years how each major component has changed. Sales and use tax revenue is on the bottom in blue and represents 69% of 2025 revenue, growing modestly. Grants are a combination of the red section as well as the white section. The white section is East Colfax BRT funding that we have placed at the top, so you have an easy visual of revenue trends without it. The green section is a combination of fares, investment income, advertising revenue, and other revenue. Grant revenue is primarily derived from federal formula funds. Federal Section 5307, other urbanized formula funds totaled $139 million. Federal 5337 rail state of good repair funds were $46 million. Colorado Energy Office Zero Fare for Youth funding provided $3 million and expires in 2026. Federal Section 5309 other capital investment grants were $2 million for a subtotal of $189 million in revenue. And East Colfax BRT revenue adds $72 million, which is a pass-through to the city and county of Denver, and RTD has significant administrative burden of these funds. Boardings held steady overall in 2025 and picked up in the back half of the year. You can see in this chart going back to 2020 with boardings in blue and fare revenue in red. Boardings were 65 million in 2025, down just 30 basis points year over year, and up 4.3% in the second half of the year versus the prior year second half. Prior years had zero fare for better air months that lifted those baseline boardings, as we put in the footnotes. In 2024, RTD implemented the new fare structure. 2025 included the EcoPass renewal and true-up in January, which helped the favorable variance to budget for fare revenue. Overall, RTD's liquidity is strong by historical standards, and we have been using reserves prudently while keeping service and assets on track. Working capital here, shown as cash and investments, both restricted and unrestricted, ended 2025 at 946 million, with 338 operating days of coverage. Balances rose in 2020 through 2024 thanks to pandemic-era relief, and they declined in 2025 as those relief funds sunset, and we continued planned operating and capital spends. Even so, we remain well above pre-pandemic levels, supporting stability and debt service capacity. Turning to operating expense with depreciation, preliminary 2025 expense came in at 1.3 billion and was 249 million, or 16% favorable to budget. Key drivers were salaries and wages of 312 million, which was 31 million, or 11% higher than 2024, due to staffing increases and programmed wage changes. Salaries and wages were 10 million, or 4% unfavorable to budget, primarily from increases under the collective bargaining agreement. Materials and supplies of 57 million were 13 million, or 19% favorable to budget, including savings of $8 million in bus diesel fuel, $2 million primarily in rail operations repair parts, and $2 million in IT low-value hardware. Services expense includes things like supplemental premium service, software support, infrastructure as a service, software subscription licenses, professional services, maintenance contracts, security contractors, and more. But services expense was 194 million, which was 48 million, or 33% higher than 2024 due to East Colfax BRT activity. Services were 197 million, or 50% favorable to budget, because 145 million of appropriated East Colfax BRT expense carries into 2026 now. Next, purchase transportation includes third-party transportation contracted services, including commuter rail, excluding Enline, fixed route bus service, and complementary paratransit service. Purchase transportation was 292 million and 35 million, or 13% higher than 2024 due to the planned increase in the concession agreement. Next, to clarify underlying performance when we exclude the East Colfax BRT pass-through of 72 million revenue, 72 million expense in 2025, as well as 10 million of prior year carry forwards, operating expense is 939 million, as you can see on the right, and non-operating revenue is 1.1 billion. This view here helps separate the agency-controlled spend from pass-through timing and is here for your reference. At the bottom of the financials in gray is RTD's preliminary decrease in net position for 2025, which is 227 million. This is 55 million better than 2024 and 163 million, or 42% favorable to budget. The improvement versus budget reflects managed expenses, stronger investment income, and timing and grants and operating flows. For the 16 million loss on capital assets, 5 million was due to terminating the Lamar advertising lease early. Additionally, when we paid off certain 2026 debt obligations early, and the prepaid interest is reflected here currently, it's 11 million in review. It's a one-time non-operating charge in 2025 rather than 2026, and does not reflect anything about operating performance. And lastly, interest expense of 125 million was 19 million favorable to budget due to refinancing that occurred early in 2025. Preliminary ending net position for RTD was $3.1 billion in 2025, as shown at the bottom in gray. RTD maintains strong reserves and a large base of invested capital assets that is the backbone of reliable service. Reserves under the board auspices totaled $700 million, including the operating reserve of $254 million, capital replacement fund of $261 million, and Fast Track's internal savings account of $192 million. Restricted funds are another $335 million, and net investment in capital assets is $2 billion. Restricted reserves declined $148 million from the prior year, due primarily to a few large transactions, such as scheduled payoff of certain certificates of participation on the call date in 2025. So in short, revenue overall grew for RTD, expenses were actively managed, liquidity remains solid, and our net position trajectory improved versus plan. As we entered the 2027 budget cycle, we'll keep aligning resources to strategic priorities. We'll maintain fiscal discipline and we'll be transparent about trade-offs with the agency optimization and sustainability plan, and you will see those next steps in the budget development item later this evening. So thank you to the finance team and the operations divisions for rigorous work in 2025. And Chair Banker, that concludes my report, and I am happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, CFO Mackey. Very interesting information, and I suspect we're going to have a number of questions. And I see Director Guzman. Why don't you start us off on some questions and comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. CFO Mackey, it looked like the salaries were $10 million over budget due to the CBA increases. How are we looking at this in planning budgets going forward to make sure that we ensure the long-term financial sustainability of RTD?
Yes, of course.
CFO Mackey.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Banker. We are reviewing this rigorously, aligning obviously with GM CEO Johnson, and we're ensuring that we maintain good forecasting projections for budget cycles going forward related to this item.
Great, thank you. I have one more.
Okay, Director.
We saw a massive 68% favorable variance with the income due to the portfolio appreciation. It looks like that's probably a one-time market value. So adjustment. So I want to understand if we are looking at the future conservatively and how we might be projecting investment and income for the upcoming year.
CFO Mackey, please.
Yes, thank you. We are, according to the fiscal policy, projecting conservatively, and we did so in the budget for 2026. You can see that the budget for 2026, I believe, is not quite as high as what we achieved in 2025. So it does depend on the interest rate environment.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Geisinger.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey, thanks very much for this. It's helpful. What did this, well, we passed the budget before you had final numbers, and the final numbers seem to come in pretty well above budget. What does this tell you about the budget we passed? In other words, does it look like we'll do better than we thought we will be doing?
CFO Mackey, it's a good question.
Yes, thank you for the question. That is a good question. And we did have projections in terms of where we would come in when we were developing the budget, even as early as July, because much of the budget development work was underway in July and August in earnest with the leadership team. And so we were able to see even partway through the year that we were trending favorably, which, as you probably know, historically is what happens. And when we developed the 2026 budget, you may recall that we really scaled back some of those, typical over budgeting behaviors that we had. So we pulled those back into the 2026 budget. So I'm glad that we came in where we did, and we frankly came in where I was hoping we would. But I would say it doesn't leave us a lot of room in 2026 because we've already accounted for that in the budget. And as you know, we are operating at a very large deficit, which needs to be balanced. And so the more proactive we can be to address that, the better.
Thanks. Just as an example, just one more question. The East Colfax, if I understood right, we carried over 178 million in revenue and 145 million in expense, which is 33 million better in terms of revenue. Is that the kind of thing that we were expecting? So that's in the current budget? Something similar?
CFO Mackey?
Yes, thank you. We were expecting that, and we did incorporate that into the 2026 budget. And we called those lines out specifically in the budget book, so you can see the detail related to East Colfax BRT and what was carried forward. So that was definitely expected.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Let's see, Director Rusha. Questions, comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair Banker. And thank you, Ms. Mackey. I have two questions, or question comment. So the first is comment about budget variance. So obviously there's always going to be some budget variance, and I guess I just wanted to know if you could share with us like pros and cons, so both sides of potentially looking at an amended budget if our, just recognizing that our numbers from, our final numbers from last fiscal year are impacting this fiscal year, and we're operating in a structured deficit. If that's just something that you could just kind of address, pros and cons.
May I, Ms. Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, I would do so very thoughtfully with certain specific items in mind, because we have a really good finance team. Heidi Wagner, she's accounted for many of those variances already. And so we would not be able to blanket adjust the budget because of where we ended the year favorable to budget. We would actually need to review to see specifically what items that we would want to adjust the budget for, ensure that the current trajectory for 2026 is expected to come in favorable to budget. Or if we want to make a change there, we certainly could, and then we could amend the budget accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Director Rusha, did you have another comment? I thought you said you had two items.
I did. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Mackey. That was helpful. So this could be right in front of me on the presentation. Bear with me. But do we have enough in our reserves to cover 3 months of operating costs?
Yes.
And I feel like I can do the basic math, but we got a lot of new information today, so I'm just going to ask the ignorant question.
That's fine. CFO Mackey?
Yes,
And-
thank you. You did ask that question in last month's meeting, and I did go back and check based on year end, and we were, because the operating expense was favorable to budget, we were within that 3 months. So I'm currently comfortable with where we're at.
Okay, thank you. And may I ask just one more quick one, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. So just for my edification, when we calculate that number and we look at our fiscal policy, are we also including the FISA in that calculation? Not a trick question. I genuinely didn't know.
CFO Mackey?
In the operating reserve coverage, no, because it's operating expense and operating reserve. So FISA is not counted in that calculation.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director Guschenritter.
Thank you, and thank you so much, CFO Mackey. Appreciate the presentation, and I'm sure this past year has felt like a decade of you being at RTD. And my question, I think others have kind of gotten at it. I'm just being more general about it. But in your experience this past year, biggest lesson learned on the budget that we can take forward to this current year and beyond. I'm just curious kind of what you might share there.
CFO Mackey.
Yes, the staff of RTD does Herculean work in the month of October and even September, I would say. And I want to make it a bit easier for them, frankly, to see if we can move up some of the work so it's not so much of a rush at the end, which would also potentially give you all earlier visibility. So I want to make the process easier on the board office and, GM CEO Johnson and everyone. I also think there's opportunity for us to be able to forecast the reserves more accurately. And we kind of frankly just started this over the past few months. But compared to what was done for the 2025 budget, I think we can tighten up some of that forecasting.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Director Guschenritter?
No, thank you.
Okay. Director Arcuri. You are muted.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. I'm curious, not right now, but yeah, I would definitely like to make this happen to more even out the workload of staff. It sounds like that would be a win-win all the way around. So I hope that works well for all of us. And I'm interested in how you would forecast reserves more accurately, but I don't want you to tell me that tonight. Thank you. I have a question going back to page 12, but my pen quit writing, and so I don't remember what my question is. Could you pop up page 12 again of your presentation on the screen real quickly, please?
Yes.
And I'm sorry for everyone else if what I'm going to ask is really stupid, but I got stuck on this and
We all have our questions.
yeah, so if you could just describe for me what working capital, what that means,
Yes.
and then what operating days of working capital are, and then how that plays into the significance of these trends. As you can tell by my question, I'm totally lost on this.
May I, Chair Banker?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
See-
so typically in organizations, when you're discussing working capital, it's current assets minus current liabilities. But I looked at the calculations that RTD has historically done, and it's slightly different. And it was close enough, I chose not to change it to get a purer view of working capital. So I put in the footnote how RTD has historically calculated it and how it's calculated here. So it's as of December 31st, 2025. It's the market value of cash and investments, both restricted and unrestricted. So the rest of current assets and current liabilities, they basically offset each other anyway, which one I wasn't too concerned. And then the operating days of working capital is working capital amount divided by operating expense without depreciation multiplied by 365 days. So this is basically estimating that we have 338 days of working capital, but again, that includes restricted. So it's not like it's all available for us to spend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Includes restricted. Okay.
Okay. Director Arcuri, any other questions or comments?
Just one more comment. I really like Director Ruch's idea of maybe we might want to consider amending the budget so that we know what we have to work with this year, and then how that plays in with some things that RTD staff is already have planned, and what those numbers would include and would not. I would be very interested in doing that.
Okay, and I know we're going to be talking a little bit more about that in the next item, that we're going to be talking about the budget process and what things happen when. Any other comments or
No, thank you. Thank you both.
Director Guzman?
Just really quickly, and this is slightly addressed in the discussion item printout, but I just want to question, like, when do you anticipate the ACFR coming forward?
It's not. May I?
CFO Mackey, yes, please.
I'm looking at the work plan. I believe it's on, if I remember correctly, June for the audit committee, right? So we would bring it to the audit committee. There's a bit of a question in timing related to one of the pension audits. So if we can get that pension audit completed early enough, we'll have it ready, I believe, by June.
And we're working with Plant Moran on that? Is that
That
correct?
particular one it's through a third party.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
but Plant Moran is also involved.
Okay.
Okay, Director Arcuri, did you have another question or comment? Okay, oh, your hand is up. I just have a couple of things. First of all, I just wanted to bring to the attention of the committee that we closed out 2025 taking the BRT in data out of our calculations with a $217 million deficit. So one of my questions is, CFO Mackey, does this include the defeasance that we did at the very end of the year in December? Does that number include or not include the borrowing or the debt that we issued?
Yes, yeah, thank you for the question. So the defeasance is primarily a balance sheet item, right? Because we're adjusting the current portion of long-term debt as well as cash. So you wouldn't typically see it on a change in that position, except for the interest expense piece, right? So the interest expense associated with those debt payments that we would have made in 2026, that we recognize that interest expense in 2025. So that little
Right.
piece, which I believe was $11 million, reduced the 2025 net position by an incremental $11 million rather than doing it in 2026. But
Right.
overall, it significantly improved our balance sheet and financial health.
Okay, two other questions. One is, where are we on the advertising contract? I know we voted on something as a board a number of months ago, and I've heard things, but I haven't had any definitive information about whether or not we had any contracts with regard to our advertising contracts. Do we have any bids accepted? Do you have any update on that? Oh, CEO Johnson, yes, if you've got the answer here.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Recognizing the adjustments that were made to the direction with an advertising contract, when staff let that solicitation, there were no responsive bids. Keeping in mind that traditionally, when you look at advertising agencies, they're looking at a more or less national market. And so what staff intends to do is recalibrate as we go forward and discern if in fact that is the appropriate path forward, recognizing that we need to do a request for information to see if in fact are there interested entities that would like to take that on? Because as we look at what we call advertisements for kings and queens, meaning certain size of the buses and things of the like, the juice may not be worth the squeeze for them. And that's what we've gotten so far. And so that's the latest update that I have available to me. I was looking to see if Stuart Summers is on the call, but I don't believe so. I don't see him because I know he was out today. So happy to double back with additional information, but that's where it stands right now. There is no active solicitation as there was not any interest within the market.
Okay, if you could perhaps give us a written reply on that, and then we could reach out to Director Pagliari to see, because this was his initiative, wondering whether or not we need to go back and modify the request. But if you could update us on where we stand with that, and then we could check in with, you know, the director who was very interested in getting this passed. And then,
Madam Chair, if I may.
oh yes,
Just a point of clarification, yes. So the request for information was just posted on February 24th, and we are expecting responses back March 25th. That will help inform a request for proposal.
okay.
Okay,
perfect.
thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. And then one more question before I go to Director Larson. It's probably a bit too early to get a sense on how we're doing with our sales tax collections for this fiscal year. You may have, what, maybe 1 month, probably not 2 months of data. Do you have any data yet for FY26?
I don't believe we have January figures yet.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay, we'll keep us apprised. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen to sales tax this year. Director Larson, question or comment?
I just wanted to clarify on the advertising contract. So we had done the I guess the RFP, and after we removed window coverings, I believe we got no bidders, and then now we have the next step was this RFI, which we'll find out about on March 25th, and that's basically the timeline. That's all the actions that we've taken so far, right? Since we...
CEO Johnson.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Larson. You are correct. When there was the action by the board, we modified the amendment to include an option. There were no responsive bidders, hence we did an RFI so we could better understand the market, so we could address that in a future solicitation. So you outlined that perfectly. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments as we close out FY25? No. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the next item. And that is very close to what we just went through. It's the 2027 Budget Development Process Overview. And CFO Mackey will lead us through that presentation. Excuse me, and we will talk about board involvement, timing, when things are going to be prepared. I think at least this time, since our CFO Mackey this will be your first full budget year. And so you will have your fingerprints on this one, which is a good thing. And you can start from the very beginning and pull it together the way you see fit. So if you would like to go ahead with the budget update, and then we'll see if we have any questions or comments afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Banker. Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer. So now I'm providing an update on where we are in the 2027 budget development process. This is an early stage check-in focused on transparency around the timeline, the assumptions we're working with, and the governance oversight and policy direction that will come before this committee over the next several months. Here's what I'll cover. First, the planning cycle timeline, how we get from today to an adopted 2027 budget. Secondly, the objectives and inputs guiding our work. Third is the framework and assumptions we're applying. And finally, key strategic questions for this committee as we approach major milestones. And this is a preview of what you will see in more detail at future meetings. This slide shows the agency's April 2026 through January 2027 timeline for budget development with major checkpoints. Through April, staff will share early views of deficit elimination strategy options for board discussion. In May, staff finalizes and prioritizes the transit asset management plan requests, and I present a budget development update. In June, staff aligns expenditures with the 5-year financial forecast, and the board will have a discussion and/or study session on priorities and deficit elimination. In July, the committee will receive a 5-year financial forecast discussion item, and the committee does not meet in August. In September, staff will return with the 5-year financial forecast as an action item. It's important to know that state statute requires that the 2027 proposed budget is posted for public inspection by October 15, which will then be followed by a committee discussion item. In November, the proposed budget will come back as an action item, and the adopted budget will go into effect on January 1 of 2027. The agency follows a cadence like this each year to ensure both rigor and transparency. Our objectives remain consistent year over year, aligning resources with the agency's strategic priorities, ensuring that investments match our commitments to community, customers, employees, and financial sustainability. We will ensure that financial sustainability with a particular focus this cycle on structural balance. We will address known risks and investment needs, including workforce, state of good repair, and system reliability. We will comply with fiscal policies and reserve targets so we remain within board-adopted thresholds for liquidity and financial health. And these principles guide every stage of the budget. Several major inputs shape the 2027 budget. The 5-year financial forecast will next come to the committee in July for an update. It incorporates the revenue projections from the University of Colorado Leeds School of Business, the transit asset management plan, labor and benefit trends, and baseline operating expenses. The agency optimization and sustainability plan feeds into efficiency and cost assumptions. Strategic priorities continue to anchor our decisions, and we monitor external factors such as inflation, legislative changes, fuel prices, and federal funding dynamics. Together, these inputs provide a calibrated foundation for decision-making. From these inputs, we develop a framework of working assumptions: expected revenue growth or constraints, anticipated levels of federal formula and discretionary grants, benefits inflation, which continues to trend upward nationally, estimates for fuel, materials, utilities, and supply chains, debt service requirements, and capital funding needs aligned with system state of good repair and strategic initiatives. These assumptions will continue to evolve as new data comes in. This slide previews the types of strategic questions we'll bring to the committee in June. They include, are there directional priorities or trade-offs the committee wants staff to incorporate Where does the board desire financial flexibility versus firmer commitments? Are there risks or external signals, economic, legislative, or operational, that the board wants us to integrate more explicitly into the budget? And these discussions will help us shape the proposed budget before it's published in October. Next steps in the 2027 budget development process is to discuss deficit elimination options with the board. This phased approach ensures the board sees information early, often, and with the ability to shape the outcomes before the proposed budget is outlined and finalized. That concludes the update, and this focus of this phase, building alignment within the agency and with this committee, so that when we bring the 5-year financial forecast and eventually the 2027 proposed budget, so that the underlying assumptions are clear and grounded in board guidance. And I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mackey. I also just wanted to add, I think everyone has this on their schedule, that next Tuesday, we're having a special study session to be talking about budget deficits and what the budget for 27 and 26 will look like. So I think we're going to be talking quite a bit about budgets this year, which actually is a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. I find it exciting. I don't know if anybody else does. But anyway, any other questions or comments about the process and the schedule? No? Okay. Okay, so then, Director Guzman, I see your hand up.
Sorry, I told you I
No,
had
go for it.
questions ready tonight, y'all. I came
Go for it.
prepared. Miss Mackey, when we're talking about the preparation of all of this, there's been, over the course of the last 3 years of my time on the board and prior to this, a distinct question about how we plan with respect to our base tax, sales and use tax funding, and the fast tracks funding, the additional 0.04%. And I would like to figure out a way, I don't know, this is my opinion, might not be popular, to separate those out, but to make sure that we are sequestering the fast tracks money differently than we have done to this point. Because we include a lot of other funding sources and combine it, and then it's really confusing to understand how it can be used, what it should be used for. And that money came with a specific set of instructions on how it was to be used. The previous boards have made decisions about what they want to include with that money. I would like to detangle this knot and make sure that we have, as you say, the right money for the right project at the right time. But we also understand that that money is funded from the correct source, so that we understand what's different between our general funds, what we can use for base operations, what's restricted and why, and where that's at separately from everything else. Is that a possibility to do?
Mr. Chairman.
Mackey?
Yes, we do incorporate base and fast tracks into the 5-year financial forecast, and I would be happy to, and I agree that we should lean into that more this year and understand that and see if there are any adjustments we need to make in that determination and process. So yes, I'd be happy to have those conversations. That's a really good call out. Thank you.
Okay, and actually, I would like to also be included. I have been meaning to ask that question now for quite some time, and I noticed in this budget, the 26 budget, there were not separate tables teasing out what was the 0.6 and the 0.4. And I just have questions as to, what methodology was used in the past. I'd like to learn more about that. So, yeah, I will be back in touch, CFO Mackey. Director Arcuri, you're next. What would you like? What's your question?
I have 2 quick questions. First of all, Ms. Mackey, the timelines that you presented in the early pages of this presentation, as well as the last page, do those reflect your hope that you can move the workload away from September to some degree?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, there's a lot of detail that's not reflected in this particular timeline because I wouldn't be able to cover it in multiple slides. So it's not explicitly stated in here. So no, it's not on this slide, but implied in it. Yes, I can also move some of this work forward. So I wouldn't make changes to this slide to reflect that, but it's not explicitly stated here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And one more follow-up, well, not a
Yes.
follow-up, but one more separate question, please.
Go for
On
it.
page 7, you talked about information you would like from the committee and the board, such as what trade-offs would we be in favor of, et cetera. Could you just give us a couple broad examples so I know what sorts of things you were hoping to receive from us from that slide?
Okay, CFO Mackey.
Yeah, so for example, in the fiscal policy, I believe there's a section, if I remember correctly, about retirement contributions for salaried employees for the defined contribution plan, where there's a range of 7 to 9%, for example. So a trade-off could be, instead of continuing the 9% contribution, would we want to change that to 7 or something different? And obviously there's a trade-off, so that funding could be used for deficit elimination or something of the like.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Kuchenritter, please. What is your question or comment?
Thank you. Mine is less around the 2027 budgeting process, and I got distracted by the word fuel and was, given everything that we have going on today, do we have the information available, like what our fuel contract is and fuel futures is? Is that publicly available, and where could I find that? Because I've not
That
seen it
is
before.
actually an excellent question, which we will also be talking a little bit more about too when we get to the survey that everybody filled out, because we're talking about how do you lock in some of those numbers. So CFO Mackey, would you like to respond to that then?
Yes, I actually met with the person who's responsible for this today. So I asked questions assuming that somebody from this committee would be inquiring. So yes, we lock our prices in for 2026. They're locked in for diesel. And as you know, that was quite favorable versus budget in 2025, as I presented. There's also a lesser portion that's related to unleaded fuel with Mansfield, and that price is not locked. The amount is significantly under $1 million, and this is for non-revenue vehicles, so it's quite small. And the team is reviewing it. Currently not too concerned because of the size, but they're looking at potential options. But the price is locked for diesel, and that's the vast majority of the expense.
Okay, great. Thank you. Director Kuchenritter, any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I just is that information available?
Yeah.
That can, what our current contracts are, and is that able to be seen somewhere? And maybe I missed it, and if I did, apologies.
Yes, we're happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Any other comments, questions? Shall we move on to the next item? Okay, so the third item is annexations overview. And Mr. Chris Quinn, are you here? Mr. Quinn? I see he's here.
You hear me? Sorry, I was having
Yes.
trouble unmuting.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Hey,
Let me see if I
Mr.
can get my
Quinn.
camera to come on.
Well, join the rest of us. I think a number of us have been struggling with Zoom meetings lately. So
My apologies. It was on when I originally came in, and for some reason it's not. Here we go. All right. Sorry about that. Let me share my screen and I will jump right in then.
okay, thank you.
So we wanted to provide the board with a little bit of a primer on the boundary and the various ways in which the boundary can change. And starting with that, just for a little bit of history and background, when the state legislature created RTD back in 1969, the original boundary that it drew up was substantially larger than it is now, in that it included all of Weld, all of Adams, Douglas, and Arapahoe counties. Over time, in the early 1970s, the legislature came back, reduced the size of the boundary, or reduced the size of the district, specifically by eliminating Weld County, most of Douglas County, and the eastern rural portions of Arapahoe and Adams counties. And then one more thing that happened back in 2005, the town of Castle Rock was kind of half in the district, half out. they voted themselves completely out of the district. And again, that was in 2005. But otherwise, the boundary for the most part has been fixed since the 1970s, with the exception of minor changes that occur when local jurisdictions at the periphery of the district, when they annex new land. So the way the annexation law works, it's governed by state statute also. And there's a couple of different ways in which annexation can affect the boundary of the district. The first is anytime a local jurisdiction on the periphery, a good example would be city of Longmont. If the city annexes territory in Weld County, which is currently not in the district, that land automatically comes in as part of the annexation. So it's an automatic thing that happens. Generally, where we've seen the most annexations over recent years that have affected the boundary have been in Longmont, Aurora, and in Parker. But again, so as soon as the jurisdiction on the periphery annexes any area outside the district, it automatically comes in. A couple of other ways in which land can come in via annexation is if a property owner or property owners at the edge of the district, if they bound the district at all, if 100% of those property owners petition to come into the district, that is another way in which they can come in. I think most recently, I think it was roughly 2020, we had a fairly substantial a landowner with a fairly substantial land holding in the town of Parker petitioned to come in. We don't see that very often, but it does happen. And then the other way, and this was most recent with the town of Erie back in 2024, a town or if the county commissioners of an area that's outside the district, but again, adjacent to the district, if they can petition for an election for the residents of that area to vote whether or not they would like to come into the district. And again, as long as I've been at RTD, that has only happened once, and that was in 2024 when the town of Erie, roughly half of which was in the district and half of which was outside, they voted to come in. The entirety of the town voted to come in. Now, when RTD gets new territory, there's like anything else, there's always some trade-offs. The benefits are the larger geographic area. We expand our tax base. And then most recently, in the case of Erie, there was a lot of confusion on who was in the district, who was out. We had actually next door neighbors. One would be in, one would be out. Some of the confusion that creates was related to whether or not people have to pay to park, since obviously in-district residents aren't subject to those fees, how taxes are collected. So it was very good in that we were able to clean up the boundary. Challenges, though, on the other side is over time, there's going to be an expectation that RTD provides service to these areas. And since most of these areas are on the periphery, we already have challenges providing service to outlying areas. And as the district's boundaries expand, that challenge will continue to get worse. So we have the problem of frequency versus coverage becomes even more intense as the district becomes bigger. And then just in kind of a quick summary, we do expect that the district will continue to expand via municipal annexations. And in fact, we expect within the next month or two to present to you that a few that we know are happening right now. Obviously, there are some benefits to that. As I noted, tax base will expand, but we also then have the challenge of providing service to these areas. It's something that we RTD can't change on our own. If we were to consider making changes to the way annexation law works, that is something that would have to be done through the legislature. And that's all I have, but would be happy to try to respond to any questions or concerns. Any
Okay,
director.
thank you very much, Mr. Quinn. I see Director Larson. What would you, questions or comments?
So we're basically subject to these communities' decisions, and we as a board, as an entity, have really no say. If they want to join, they can join. That's correct?
Mr. Quinn?
Yes, assuming that they are a local jurisdiction that is already fully or partially in the district. So as the example I gave, if it's, say, Longmont, Town of Parker, City of Aurora, where there's areas that are maybe in or outside, but yes.
But if they're adjacent and they're not part of a locality that's part of the district, I guess, could they join just by voting to join?
Yeah. So if what they could do is via their county commissioners petition to come in to hold an election. So that's another way that's possible.
And just one last question. So, I mean, you said there's an expectation that then we'll provide service, but of course, we can sort of tell them as they're contemplating it that we have, no plans to provide service anytime soon, I guess. And if we did that, they could decide or, to vote or not vote for it, I suppose.
Yeah, as an example, when the town of Erie was contemplating fully coming in as part of the election, we did make it very clear that given our current system, the system optimization plan at the time did not show any increases in service in the parts of Erie that would be coming in, and that, we couldn't, there was no way that we could guarantee any kind of service levels if they opted to vote in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, real quick before we go on to some of the other questions, Mr. Quinn, can you tell us, do we have any options here? Or I'm assuming if Erie expands their borders like they did last November, we have no option. Do we have any legislative legal options for us? Or should we pursue that or not pursue it?
I will defer to my general manager on that.
Okay, CEO Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of full disclosure, I was alluding to that when we had our pre-brief, hence that's why we wanted to ground everybody in this going forward. If it is the board's desire to incorporate that into our legislative program, I felt it was germane to put that forward. Just because I can tell you I wasn't well versed in this initially, and recognizing that, there's very little relief. So I would yield to the board to have a collective discussion on that, and staff is ready to support the direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Gucciaritter.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I found this really interesting and wasn't very, very well versed on it. And I think my question's kind of getting at what some of the other directors have been getting at, but it's really somewhat around, I guess, the addition of territory, but more geared towards cities or counties or neighborhoods, eliminating RTD service. Like, how baked out of a process do we have as an agency to address that? And how can the board, what is the board's involvement in that?
Mr. Quinn, do you have any suggestions?
Here again, I may want to defer to our general manager. So,
Mr. Quinn, if you have thoughts, please go forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, Director, I just wanted to make sure I understood the question. That I think you had said that given that the fact that there are areas that may not want to be included in the district.
So it's more, it's more geared towards, there could be additions, but I guess I'm more geared towards the subtraction piece. People wanting to let go of RTD service in their areas, and just how baked out of a, like, or do we just say, okay, great, we understand, or do we have like a blitz or whatever?
Yeah, the last time, or in fact, I think the only time I'm aware of, besides the legislative activities that occurred back in the 1970s when the state was adjusting the boundaries on a almost fairly regular basis, is when Castle Rock voted itself out in 2005. If my memory is correct, they sought the ability to do that via the legislature so that they were able to put it on the ballot. I'm not aware, and I might have to defer to our legal team if there is any other mechanism for de-annexation out of the district. Just and one more thing that I'll add, when we were conducting the Reimagine RTD process back in roughly the 2020 timeframe, my understanding is there was a bit of discussion on whether or not the district boundaries should be altered to address the very issues that you're raising right now. At that time, and I don't think it was really a very in-depth look, but at that time, the decision was made to just leave things as they are now.
Okay, thank you. I also see Mr. Soroy has his hands up. Perhaps, Bill, do you have any comments or suggestions on this topic?
Yes, I can just say that, I've certainly been engaged in conversations in the recent past about people that have expressed an interest in looking at leaving the district. I think some of the issues that, and I would also defer to our general counsel on this specifically, but issues in terms of if they do leave the district, I think there are still obligations that they have related to, paying off debt associated with fast track. So I think a lot of times what I've seen is a lot of conversation about potentially leaving, but they will look in the details of it. They usually kind of pull back. But again, I will express that this conversation probably will kind of continue, especially as we start the comprehensive operations analysis in terms of looking at service in the future and how that may play into people's wants and desires on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Director Rusha.
I'm sorry. Could I?
Oh, I'm
follow
sorry.
up on-
Director Gutschwiner, yes, finish your thought there.
Thank you, and thanks for that information. I guess where I'm going with this, and Mr. Soroy, you've kind of you've alluded to it a little bit, that with the COA, who knows what could happen. And so where I'm going with that is, should we have a playbook in an approach as an agency to address that situation, or do we just deal with it as it comes? That is really the nature of kind of what I'm getting at. I don't need a definitive answer. It's an open question that I hope we think about and put some careful thought into.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Soroy.
So just to build on what Chris said about the Reimagine process. So this was an issue that we did address in the Reimagine RTD process, and we looked at kind of basically scenarios of if people wanted to get out of the district, or if we wanted to add people. I think the conclusion of that was it was difficult for people to leave the district because of the complications associated with their obligations, and we didn't come up with a clear strategy on that, because that certainly was the expectation going in, is that, do we have a clear strategy of, do we want to shrink the district, or do we, what is our approach? I think it was it's a complicated issue that I don't think has a straightforward answer. And I do think, having further discussion about it during the COA, I think will probably lead to more. I don't know if it'll lead to any clear direction. But it's just something that, in terms of Reimagine, when we looked at it, it was very complicated, and there was no clear direction defined for the agency.
Hey, if I may add, this might be something that we look at and prepare for the next legislative session. Clearly, the legislative session going on right now will be wrapping up in what, 2, 3 months. But it bears further discussion to see whether or not the board is interested in changing current law. Director Rusha, your question.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I think what I was going to say has been said by one person or another. We're very close. I I would just offer, since we're talking about it, it's my opinion, and it might not be popular, that where we have geographic regions where we do not provide service, we've never provided service, and we're not going to provide service. Perhaps we gobbled up some land in the early fast tracks days. I think it's only fair to allow them to de-annex if they want to, but as it's been noted, there's no mechanism for communities to do that, which makes a lot of sense, right? Dissolving your government or leaving a governmental unit is a very big deal. And so, the legislature has to create a pathway for that. They've only done it once, which was Castle Rock. So anyway, I would just kind of offer, it's just this single director's opinion that for those cases, I would not object if the board or the body had a fairly neutral to favorable position on that. I also would guess that the legislature might make that decision for us. If not next year, maybe this year. But anyway, I also just want to say that I appreciate this conversation coming forth, and the thorough history and the considerations. And so I just want to say thank you to staff for bringing this before us today, so that it's top of mind for issues that will be coming back soon. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Guzman?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Just tipping my hat to Director Guchenritter. I'm picking up your crayons and coloring with them. I think we need to consider a couple of things. One of the startling bits of information I've learned on the board is that public transit agencies like WMATA, which are a third of our size, have 3 times our budget because of how they're funded. Colorado ranks somewhere around 44th out of 50 of the states for public transportation funding. And of the 23 largest public transportation providers, RTDs, funded at around 17th. We float around that category. And so I think it is worth having the conversation about the size of our district geographically with respect to how we're funded. Without participation from the state, there's limits to what we can do. A dollar can only be spent one way. So I do appreciate the conversation. Mr. Quinn, thank you for bringing this up. I've been through 2 annexation requests in my time on the board. They're quite complicated, a lot of detailed reading and learning. So I got caught up to this really quickly because we've done it twice as I've been on here to make a vote for approval to the board and recommendation. But understanding the challenges of leaving is probably more of concern than anything. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Arcuri?
Thank you. Oh, I guess I am not muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And this question is either for Mr. Soroy or Mr. Quinn, or both, if you have different comments. When someone wants to join RTD, I'm assuming they kind of approach someone at RTD beforehand. Do you also consult with the state demographer or local chambers of commerce to see what type of growth, where is expected in these communities, and if it's going to be more residential versus business, and what type of business, or things like that? Considered to help our RTD make decisions and know what might be requested?
Who would like to answer that? Mr. Soroy or Mr. Quinn?
May I, Chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Quinn.
So in the case of when it's a municipal annexation, as I noted, obviously we don't have any control on whether they come in or not. In the cases where the most recent case is the Parker case in 2020, and then Erie in 2025. As part of the analysis that we conducted, we did look at how is the land zoned. Given that it was relatively small areas that we were looking at, we didn't do any kind of sales tax calculations on what might come in, figuring it would be somewhat advantageous, or excuse me, it it would provide us with a additional tax base, but probably not anything big enough to really alter our budgets. But to your point, yes, we do look at the zoning, what type of development is anticipated in those areas, and then obviously what kind of service expectations might go along with that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Director Carey?
If RTD sincerely feels that it cannot meet service expectations, would that be conveyed to someone who's interested in annexing upfront?
Yeah, in the case of Erie was a little bit unusual in that at least as long as I've been at RTD, that's the only time we've actually had a voting to come in like that. But in the case of the next most recent annexation that wasn't part of a municipal annexation in Parker, where it was the property owner that petitioned to come in, we did make it clear that yes, we do have services adjacent to where you are, but there is no expectation. Please don't have any kind of expectation that we would be able to directly serve the proposed development that's coming along with the annexation.
I see. Interesting. Anything else, Director Carey?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, with that then, thank you very much, Mr. Quinn and Mr. Soroy. And Mr. Soroy, best of luck to your wherever you're headed. I know you've been with RTD for a long time and you will be missed. So thank you for your work. We've got one more item for discussion, and then we'll be going to other matters. And just a heads up, there are a couple of items under other matters. So we're getting through the agenda. I suspected it was going to be sort of a long one tonight. So here's the last item on the discussion part of our agenda, and that's the budget options survey that you all filled out. So first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. So this is where we are at this point. So first of all, I want to thank Vice Chair Arcuri for her help and her suggestions, and also our staff, especially Mr. Kroll. The point in this survey was not necessarily to make decisions, but to identify a lot of possibilities to continue to explore how we might solve our deficit situation and move past the deficit situation, hopefully, to get on more stronger financial ground. So I would like to actually ask Mr. Kroll to present some of the results that we've taken from this survey. We asked close to 40 questions, but tonight we're only going to be covering about half of them. The other half, I think we're going to be bringing some of those questions or results, I should say, from the survey to the full board on the 17th. But tonight, we're just going to be talking primarily about what our interest might be in pursuing some revenue opportunities, how we handle our budget practices, and perhaps some legislative opportunities which may or may not be available to us this year. But I just wanted to make sure that, let's put it this way. I was very pleased, first of all, to find some of the results from the survey just to the Finance Committee. This was not filled out by the entire board. But as we start to go through the results of the budget survey, I think you're going to find that we have a lot of consensus, which is hopeful, and also will give our staff some direction as to what kinds of things the board is looking for as we go forward and balance our budget. So with that, Mr. Kroll, would you like to start the next presentation?
Sure thing. Thank you, Director Banker. I am going to share my screen here. And I believe you all should be seeing the presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, we see it.
Great. So as Director Banker mentioned, or Committee Chair Banker mentioned, the survey was administered recently to the board, and to the committee. And we're gonna just quickly go over some high-level results here, and I'll talk to you all a little bit about the survey structure and intent, although Director Banker covered much of the intent in her remarks. There was a section on the survey that related to revenue opportunities, another section that asked questions related to how the budget should be formatted and presented to the board, and then a final section that discussed legislative opportunities. So the intent and structure, again, was to generate ideas from the committee members then initially, and then proceed to gaining input from full board members towards eliminating the budget deficit for the next fiscal year. Questions asked directors to provide input on ideas and suggestions related to revenue opportunities, potential fare changes, budget formatting ideas, and potential legislative changes. And the goal is really to identify ideas with broad support for further consideration. So again, no decisions were made here. These are just ideas that you all have collectively indicated an interest in learning more about and pursuing further. At the time the packet materials were published, 6 of the 7 Finance and Planning Committee members had responded, and the results I'm going to share with you all reflect those responses. So several questions were asked regarding revenue opportunities to consider learning more about, and there was strong support for further exploring the following: partnering with external entities on capital projects to share capital expenses, enhancing anti-fare evasion strategies, including fare gates at major stations, sale of excess land for profit, and increasing parking fees. There was little interest in further exploring debt restructuring for short-term savings, cash savings at the expense of higher long-term borrowing costs, and hiring additional past program sales staff and incentivizing that staff with commissions. So those 2 ideas don't seem to have the consensus support to explore further, but the initial 4 that I referenced above do. We also asked in the survey questions related to different fare programs and whether directors who responded to the survey and are on the Finance and Planning Committee would like to examine those programs for further revenue growth. And you can see the responses here. Basically the number of positive supports is listed in bold out of the total number of respondents. And directors, when presented with this question, were allowed to select all that they were interested in. So you can see there really the adjusting pass price for annually for inflation and a live subsidy senior discount were ideas that were not particularly popular with the majority, but everything else above did receive some level of indication that board members would like to learn more about ways to grow revenue from those programs. Then we asked questions about budget format options. The following ideas related to how the budget is formatted and approved did receive support for further exploration. To have the board approve a prioritized list of capital projects, to have the board approve a multi-year capital budget separately from the annual operating budget, and to have the multi-year capital budget contain projected annual expenses for each included project, and then to separate out capital carry forward projects from newly approved capital projects. And then this list continues. These ideas also had support to present the board with multiple budget options or scenarios from which the board will approve a budget, to present pass-through grant revenues and expenses separately from RTD expenses and revenues, to approve projects in advance of their submission to the Denver Regional Council of Governments Transportation Improvement Plan, and to provide more regular updates to the Finance and Planning Committee regarding grant applications the agency is considering and or pursuing. And that is actually an item up for discussion. That's an item that's going to come next month on your committee's approved work plan. Will be an update regarding grant applications. And then there were 4 potential issues that would require legislative change that were the directors who were surveyed were asked to indicate whether they wanted to learn more about. And you can see the results of the survey here. Investment flexibility was the first one asked, which would allow the board to place a small percentage of agency funds into higher yielding long-term investments, such as equity mutual funds, to generate higher returns. I would be remiss if I didn't note, generally higher investment returns are associated with higher risk of loss. Fuel cost hedging. This is a nod to Director Guchenritter's questions from earlier. Currently, state statute prevents the agency from hedging fuel costs directly. And as CFO Mackey alluded to, we partner with external entities to achieve those hedges. And essentially, there would be some opportunity here potentially to save revenues or decrease expenses by removing that intermediary. And then Director Banker had a question that she wanted to receive input on related to transit fees from tolls, or transit revenues from tolls or fees charged on tolls. And that would require legislative changes to allow RTD to collect revenues from that. And then fare citation revenue. This obviously is not a large dollar amount, but it is something that currently, when a citation is issued for an individual on the system for not having valid fare, the revenue from that citation, if the fine is paid, does not actually come back to the agency. It goes to the local municipality in which that lack of valid fare violation occurred. And with that, Director Banker, I have no other slides to present.
Mr. Cole, could you go back to page 9? I wanted to explain that a little bit more and then see if there were any questions. We've been talking, we've had a couple of informal conversations about the capital budget. So I just wanted to make sure that some of these items were clear and everybody understood what we meant by them. So if you go to item number 2, for example, have the board approve a multi-year capital budget separate from the annual operating budget. The only thing that we'd be doing here, and actually, Director Geisinger, this was one of your suggestions, we would have when it comes time for the board to vote and accept the budget, we would have 2 separate votes. One would be in operating, one would be in capital, but of course the budgets would be combined. But by doing that, it would give the board an opportunity to ask more questions about the capital budget and feel more comfortable about what's contained in the capital budget. That's the only reason there. It's not going to save us any money or anything of those things, but we were hoping it might make it a little bit more transparent, shall we say, to the board so that they know exactly what they're voting on by cutting the budget basically in half and having a little bit more time to talk about each piece. Item number 3, to have the multi-year capital budget contain annual expenses for each included projects. This one needs more explanation, and I think a very good example of this is the 5 miles of rail reconstruction in downtown. If you recall, we voted on this appropriation, I think it was in the July budget, and we appropriated $152 million. And this project is going to take a while before it's complete and before all the bills come in and it's actually paid out. So for $152 million, it is highly likely that this project is going to be occurring over 3 fiscal years. So we voted for it in last July. The last time I looked, and Mr. Cole, add information here if you know it, the last time I looked, we had only paid $7 million to that project out of the 152. So then most of that project, while it was appropriated in 25, okay, we're actually going to be paying for most of it in fiscal year 26. So one suggestion would be for some of the larger cost projects is to perhaps cut them into different fiscal years. And it would just be able, quite frankly, what that would do, if you would stop and think about that a little bit, it definitely would change the final deficit or surplus number that we have by actually appropriating it in the year that we think we're going to expend the dollars. Clearly, we can do budget amendments and shift the money if things go faster or slower than we anticipated. But I just wanted to provide a little bit more explanation to that. And then with regard to number 4, I think that's probably pretty clear. If you were to go back to our budget documents and you see that when you're looking at the capital projects, it's not just the capital that we approve for that particular fiscal year, but we're also looking and reappropriating the dollars that were previously approved for other capital projects. And you put them all together, and then you put them into our budget document the way we have it set up right now. And it just shows that we have an even larger deficit. So I wanted to try to explain that a little bit, and I see some hands up, so we'll go ahead and ask, get your input. But then before we leave this topic, I'd also like to go back to and explain a little bit more to the revenue suggestions that we have. So with that, Director Guchenritter, do you have comments or suggestions, ideas? What are your thoughts on this?
None of the above. It's a question for CFO Mackey, just around the supported budget format options. CFO Mackey, just curious, in terms of effort and energy and work that this would add to your team, I'm just curious to hear your perspective on that. Not that that will dictate the direction that we go, but I would love to hear your input. Thank you.
CFO Mackey.
Yes, thank you. So number 1 is no incremental effort, because I think I'm pretty sure we would do something similar to what we did last year, perhaps just provide the list of capital projects earlier in the year rather than waiting until October to do it. So that would be no incremental effort. For number 2, that would require some incremental effort and balancing, because if there's an adjustment potentially to the capital budget, that could perhaps impact the operating budget. And so I reviewed this briefly with Todd Nickel, and he indicated this would require a bit of extra work and care. The third item, Plant Moran did review, and they were indicating most likely, they said it needed a bit more review, that we would most likely need to appropriate the full amount up front. But in terms of the budget, we probably would only need to budget a portion of it for the current fiscal year, and we wouldn't have to budget the full amount. So if that makes sense, appropriate the full amount, but budget only a portion of it. But Plant Moran would like us to review this against Colorado law, as well as the board's current policies, to ensure it aligns with that. And yes, that would require incremental expense, but we should absolutely do it if we are allowed to by law. Number 4, that is actually currently in the 2026 budget book. So that's something we do already do. And so there's no incremental effort related to that.
Okay. Any other comments, Director Kuchenritter?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Director Geisinger.
Thank you very much. I thought there were, a lot of interesting ideas here. And, the problem with surveys where you're saying yes, no is that, it's easy. You kind of hate to say, no, we're not going to look at that. But I do think, looking at it is very different from supporting it. We need to just have a little warning there. For instance, the looking at all the fairs. That's a big one for where, there's the juice or squeeze. And, they may be worth looking at, but we got a lot of positive feedback out of changing the fares, and it doesn't mean we're going to go back and change our fares way up. I think we still need to be careful, despite the support for introducing and taking a look at the changes.
Okay, and I would fully agree with you. It would be very difficult. It would be a very difficult step for us to start looking at fare changes. Certainly, some of the passes I think should be looked at. I don't know when the last time. Perhaps you can tell me, Director Geisinger, since you've been on the board now for a number of years, longer than I have. When was the last time we looked at the cost of a neighborhood pass or eco pass, college pass, semester pass? So those might be something that we could also talk about. But I'm also thinking in this area, this time when we're facing some very serious deficits, I think it's just important we put all our options on the table and we have a full discussion with the board, not just the finance committee, but the full board, of course, needs to be included in all of this, because these are difficult decisions, but something that I think when you're looking at a $200+ million deficit, we need to talk about it. So, so with that, my 2 cents worth, and hopefully, I'm not quite sure what's planned for the meeting on the 17th and whether or not we're going to be getting into any of these discussions, but at least we've opened up the book to start deciding what direction we want to go in. So Director Geisinger, I see your hand is still up. Do you have another comment?
No.
Oh, okay. Director Guzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to express my frustration with the way that this is being presented. Along the lines of what Director Geisinger said, of course, we can consider doing this, but I don't know that I agree, particularly with the frame that's up now, that like is an appropriate word to examine for revenue growth. I'd like to examine a lot of things for revenue growth, and I responded to the best of my ability to what I was sent. But there's a lot of caveats in the survey that we were sent. And when you pull a lever in one area of revenue and income, it can have an adverse effect or an unintended consequence elsewhere in cost to the agency. And that was a resounding problem and issue with the survey that we received. It seems like we're looking at bits and pieces and not the whole, which is a problem in doing this kind of work. And I just want to express here and now that anything that we look at for doing this, we do need to take a step back in that consideration and understand if it's going to affect another area. Neighborhood and eco passes are contracted on a yearly basis with neighborhoods and certain employers. The college pass and the semester pass are different types of programs that are consistently negotiated for their use and service once they are created with a department in RTD that's looking at the usage of those passes and negotiating what would be a fair price for an institution. And there's a difference between what UC Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder, and the Metro State University have in their policies and how they can apply funds for that. And so I think we need to be very careful about what we're discussing. When it comes to some of the other things that you were talking about, for example, and you wanted feedback, so here we go. Is the juice worth the squeeze? How much does it cost to put in ticketing gates and keep them in a state of good repair and usefulness at Denver International Airport? And are we really seeing fare evasion at such a high rate that it requires doing that type of capital investment? I question that understanding and that theory. And I know we are doing our work checking fares and doing other mitigation efforts throughout the agency, paying for Allied Universal and the police departments to do it. Now, the other thing that I would say that was questioned in here that I really would like to know about is the remittance of fines and fees. And that's because those typically pay for the cost of the court that's hearing the case. We're not directly filing these, so typically those are going through a local police department or a local jurisdiction to their appropriate court. And I think that we have to remember ourselves and remember our lane when it comes to that. I think we could request or find out more information about what could be remitted to the agency for a fare evasion charge. Certainly makes sense. And then I really am concerned that we are looking far over our skis with respect to the tolls or fees. While we should discuss it and talk about it, certainly is something worth having the conversation about to educate ourselves on. I-25, I-70, and US 36 are held under one form of government where those fees are collected, and that money is designated through CDOT. The other ones are private-public ventures where we're not likely to see any funding come from those. So I wonder if it might be a little ambitious and a little out of our realm of expertise and our realm of responsibility to go clanking a collection tin through other entities that have nothing to do with what we do. And I want to be careful about how I say that because they have a proper function, their own government, their own governance. So does it make sense to go there? Again, educating ourselves is fine. I listed my answers as yes or maybe because I don't think there's any reason to say no, but I want to be conscious and I want to be fully understanding that some of these may not pan out for very good reason because we don't own them, we don't operate them, and we don't govern them. So I don't know what's possible in those partnerships, but I also want to be very careful about how we have these conversations because it could affect potentially future partnerships or what we're able to do. And we don't want to burn any bridges before we even have the conversation. Thank you.
So thank you for raising all those issues. There's no doubt these are going to be hard decisions. These are, when you balance a budget and you're in debt deficit situation like we are, all these decisions are going to be difficult. A couple of comments, though, about the items that you see up here. First of all, I've been asking anybody, give me ideas, suggestions. Which, by the way, when you filled out the survey, we did ask for suggestions. I've not seen the survey. Jack has been compiling them, and he has the suggestions that were made by the Finance Committee, and hopefully we can see that on the 17th when we get all of the information pulled together. With regard to the legislative changes that are up right now, excuse me, a couple of comments. The fair citation revenue, just an FYI, actually was a conversation that I had with our CEO, Johnson, and she was mentioning that to me as a possible revenue raiser, and I thought that was a great idea, so I added the list. Transit fees from tolls, I've been doing a little bit of research on that one. And yeah, there's no doubt it would be somewhat controversial, I'm sure. Especially the one on US 36. The more research I've been doing on it, the more complicated it is with the concessionaires agreement. However, there are some opportunities there, assuming CDOT is open to having these kinds of discussions. And I also know that Bustang is looking for revenue sources, and this particular topic has come up for Bustang. So I figured, if it's good for Bustang, if Bustang and CDOT are even considering this kind of option, let's add it to a list. The other two, investment flexibility and fuel cost hedging, I will thank Mr. Kroll for those suggestions. Anyone that has a suggestion on how to raise revenue or cut the budget or find efficiencies, we want to bring them forward to this committee and have a discussion, because somehow we need to lead, we need to come up with suggestions that we think the board will pass and accept. It's going to be hard. We still have to have a balanced budget by law. And so we need to keep working on these. This is the first time these kinds of ideas have been brought up. I'm just asking everybody to consider them, to think about them, get more information, get your questions answered. But you know, we're looking for coins in the couch, and even if it's only $100,000, $50,000, I'd like to see it being put on the table, because you know, you add all these things together, and this is how you reach a balanced budget. So with that, I see, well, I will ask Director Ruscia, since you are Finance Committee, and then Director Nicholson, you will be next. So Director Ruscia, your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for bringing these topics before the committee and the board. So is it possible if staff could just go back a slide to the fairs slide?
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. So I wanted to, I think I raised this last year, but I just wanted to flag it again. I would really like the board and staff to seriously consider doing away with College Pass and just replacing it with a college student discount. It will probably be the same amount of revenue, maybe more, but certainly increase ridership. So depending on what college you go to, your college program might give you 50% off. It might be less than 50%. Not all campuses participate, and so some students aren't able to participate at all. And I just think it would be beneficial for us to have a program that was a college, discount, right? So that'd probably be 50%, just like our other discounts. That's one I'd really like us to study,
Thank you.
and try to get a good economic and market scope on that one. And the other, I just wanted to flag, we also right now have a free fare for all first responders except for paramedics and EMTs. And so I think that those are some things we should look at as well. That's not going to nudge us one way or another on revenue, but it's just more of a values conversation. And so as we just move forward, because I understand we're going to have a fair study soon, I just wanted to just express like interest and encourage folks to, get behind, really looking at all of our discounts, who gets a discount, who doesn't, where could we improve, and also just removing barriers wherever we can. I mentioned college students before. I'm going to guess that most of them qualify for low-income fares, but as we all know, there are several barriers and hurdles to get approved for that program. So just again, recognizing that other transit agencies have similar programs for their college students, I think that would, again, just be a net win for us and the communities that we serve. Thanks.
Thank you. Very thoughtful. I also just wanted to mention that it was Director Pagliari that had suggested offering commissions to some of our salespeople at RTD that are trying to sell eco passes and passes to apartment complexes and other thing. And I thought that was sort of a clever idea that would certainly incent some of our employees to look for more customers. But I just wanted to add that because I thought that was pretty clever. Director Nicholson, welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all here. I don't speak on F&P terribly often. I really appreciate the work that you have put into this, Chair Banker. I think it's the first time I've gotten to say that, to ask, some of these tough questions, because I think there are a lot of good opportunities both to change the way that we go about thinking through the budget process and about what types of fare products we offer. I think that, there's sort of two major points that I would want to raise in that way. And the first one is that it was Director Guzman's comment that got me to sort of want to say something. There are times when lowering the cost of something is going to get you more revenue than raising the cost of it. And when it comes to something like the Neighborhood Eco Pass, I have buildings in my district that are interested in it, that are thinking about it, that are not 100% sure if it makes sense for them financially. And at the end of the day, realistically, we would be better off taking the money. In most cases, we would be better off taking the money and getting buildings signed up for whatever price we can get them to pay for it, essentially. I mean, if we could negotiate these deals the way that any private company would, which is to negotiate each one at whatever price we could sell it for, there's no downside really to us aside from lost fare revenue from people who would potentially be using the service in that building already, for us not to be trying to get the more and more apartment buildings using the eco passes. So I think we have to be careful about, we can just raise the price of a neighborhood eco pass or of an eco pass, and we'll raise more revenue, because, the alternative is a business says, or an apartment building says, nope, I'm not interested anymore, and I'm dropping it. And so I think there's a really fine line there, with those programs. And I'm actually very much in support of us looking at how we can lower the price of those programs to try to get more buildings on board over the next 5 years to try to drive ridership. And the same thing is true with the college and semester passes. The college pass works because it has the same sort of economics as an eco pass. And, I'm not sure that the same numbers would fly, and we would get the same amount of buy-in if we simply offered a 50% discount, because the college pass is a much larger discount per person, because it requires every single person to buy in. So I'm glad we're looking at this. We're going to have a much longer conversation about it, but we should keep in mind, as Director Guzman wisely said, that changes in one place can have meaningful consequences in another, and you can't just pull one lever and expect everything to go the way you want it to.
Okay, thank you for those comments. The only thing I would add is, don't forget we have a lot of inflation going on in the world these days. And it would be interesting to take a look to find out, when was the last time a price was raised? How long ago was it? And quite frankly, the other issue is, how aggressive are we going out trying to sell our product? With all the apartment complexes that we have out there, especially in my district, it looks like there's a glut of apartments right now. And we even had legislation, was it last year, I think, where the legislature is asking RTD to go out and try to sell some of these passes to those kinds of communities. And I think they could very easily be a rich source of new revenue for us, but we have to go and knock on doors and see whether or not we can sell the product, and see if it's of interest to many of those folks. So anyway, thank you for your comments. It's going to be a difficult discussion in the next couple of months, there is no doubt, but we need to have it. So Director Guzman, yes.
Thank you. You asked for suggestions on other things, and I know that it's not in this report.
It will
But
be.
I did include that we need to, as a finance committee, complete our work in the year, and passing a FIFE and having a 5-year financial forecast clearly and understandably guiding the agency that's approved by the board is one of the determinative factors of planning an appropriate budget. So we still do not have one. We still have not completed that, and that's something that I would insist that we try and get done sooner rather than later, because even the last opportunity we had, we weren't able to come to consensus around that. And I think that we are on uncertain ground because we can't make a decision with respect to that piece of work that informs all of this. With the other things, I'm happy to have conversation on it, but I want to make sure that we move forward from this conversation. So I'm giving you a landing stripe, but also when it comes to looking at updated costs and fares and all of that, the question that you asked, for those of us that have been serving on the board for the last 3 years, fares were recalculated in 2023, and on an annual basis, the pass fare structure and the costs are negotiated at the termination of the previous year's contract, or before the termination of the previous year's contract. I would hope that the general manager CEO might correct me if I'm wrong here, but having worked on matters with Metro State and having to explain this over and over again, those contract updates are made as their contracts are coming to a conclusion. And so that's ongoing work that's done consistently at RTD. And so I know you don't intend perhaps to make it sound like we're asleep at the wheel, because we certainly are not, but we don't oversee all of these functions on a daily basis because we're the governance board. And so while we might look at what the policy is for how we set the prices and what that looks like, there are certainly people that are working night and day at our agency to make sure that we have updated information currently available to us. And I just want to give that shout out to our staff, because they do work all the time that we know nothing about and keep these numbers current. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. CEO Johnson. You're muted.
I believe that was inadvertent, Madam Chair. All I would say, Director Guzman touched upon this, but looked at the past programs quite naturally as part of the fair study and equity analysis, because we had to ensure that we garnered input and then basically revise the parameters, for instance, with EcoPass leveraging an insurance model. But just wanted to add that because I know you had asked the question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is not going to be easy. That is for sure. But at least I think by doing this survey, it's given us a starting point. So we've put some ideas out there, some suggestions, looking for more. We need to find revenue, we need to cut expenses, we need to find efficiencies, those three things. And we're starting early in the year, which is a good thing. So we've got time to discuss, to figure things out, but we are also going to have to figure out a time where we make decisions. So whether or not we go forward with any of these kinds of increases, maybe we'll get a better sense on the 17th. But because we're the finance committee, it was mentioned to me that instead of asking the whole board on all of these issues, that the finance committee should take the lead on it, and then we make suggestions to the rest of the board. So I think we're going to be having quite a few discussions like this, and it's going to be hard and difficult, but we've got to go forward and we'll do it. So this here is just, we're not voting on this. This was just a presentation for discussion. You can see where we're coming out on some things where people are, what they're thinking. We do need more information. I should also add the fair presentation that our staff prepared. I think it was for the September or October board meeting, was excellent. And we need more information like that so that we can make more decisions along these lines. But that particular piece that I know CFO Mackey was working on, and I know our marketing team was working on, was extremely helpful. And that's actually where a lot of this information came from. So with that, I know it is past 7:30, but we still have two other items under other matters. So Mr. Kroll, your suggestion on whether or not we take a 10-minute break to let the CART folks catch up, or whether we continue with two more items that's on under other matters.
I've received word that it would be good to take a break, just given the amount of discussion that's occurred, and the CART transcriber is going to
Okay,
need some time.
that's good. Okay, so it's 7:40. How about a 10-minute break then? We'll start at 7:50. So grab something to eat, something to drink, and keep your strength up, and we'll keep talking. Okay, see you in 10 minutes.
As a reminder, the recording has stopped, but we are still live streaming to YouTube.
Okay, we're ready, Mr. Kroll. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Okay, so we will start. We are now at other matters. I would like to have we have two other matters that we need to talk about, and perhaps others if you've got some things you want to put on our plate. The first is a relation to a letter submitted by several committee members, including Vice Chair Arcuri, Director Rusha, and myself, to CEO Johnson regarding reorganization of staff at the agency. The second item, so you can all know, is conversations with regard to the concessionaire that operates A, B, and G, and the DTO operator, and what was written in the Denver Post, about a week or so ago. So I have talked to our CEO and asked her to comment on both of those topics. And so CEO Johnson, are you ready to address? Do you want to, your choice as to what topic you want to start with?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to engage with you yesterday. Happy to clarify some critical points relative to things that you all as a board have read in the media. And as I indicated at the board meeting on February 24th, I do believe several issues have been conflated. So thank you for the opportunity to recognize me this evening to clarify an important distinction between two major efforts that are currently underway here at the agency. There is the internal organizational realignment, and then there have been talks relative to what the leadership team and I are doing as we look at stabilizing the organization from a financial vantage point, that's right in line with the conversations that preceded the break that this body just took. So what I will state first and foremost is that the organizational realignment is an effort designed to strengthen RTD internally, improving how the organization works day to day. And this stems directly from the findings of the organizational design and workplace assessment that I commissioned back in it was November of 2023 that culminated in a report that was released by the third-party consultant in June of 2024. And really what we were able to ascertain from that, let me just step back and say the organizational design and workplace assessment what led me to commission that was due to the fact that we take employee surveys on an annual basis since I've been here in the seat in which I currently hold. And it is done on an anonymous basis because it's important to understand people's opinions, perceptions, and attitudes about the work environment. More specifically, there was an opportunity for individuals to provide open-ended comments, and quite naturally, upon reading those open-ended comments, I thought it was most prudent to delve a little deeper and ascertain what the genesis of those open-ended comments were, hence the organizational design and workplace assessment. So one thing that's certain relative to that report that was available to all staff, and at the time the board, and it is a public facing document quite naturally, it highlighted that there were structural silos, unclear reporting lines, and gaps in leadership roles that have impeded collaboration, communication, and decision-making across functional work groups in the agency. So the realignment, simply put, is aimed at improving efficiency, strengthening accountability, and reducing fragmentation within the operations and communications and engagement departments and the work groups that are within the Office of the Deputy CEO, so that RTD is better positioned to deliver high quality service. And some of you may recall just last year, being newer to the board, having conversations around various leadership positions. And I stated that part of my hiring was intentional in the sense that there were elements that needed to be leveraged first and foremost relative to getting the right leaders in the right place. So want to be clear that the organizational realignment is not primarily a cost-cutting exercise. Rather, its focus is on building a more effective, cohesive and responsive agency. And as we move forward, that's exactly what the leaders with auspices of those respective groups are doing. In contrast, the deficit elimination strategies, and the team and I have coined that the agency optimization and sustainability plan, is the agency's response, or I should say staff's response in this instance, recognizing that we're going to provide strategies and options for the board's review and guidance, is responding to the structural deficit that we have referenced this evening, and that $250 million in relationship to the 2027 budget. And so this unprecedented fiscal challenge requires the agency to align expenditures, as we all know, with ongoing revenues and prioritize services. As you just said, Madam Chair, there's going to be some conversations that ensue that'll be difficult. And so just wanted to take the opportunity to outline the difference, but keeping in mind that the leadership team, we are beginning this work now, due to the fact that the agency is presented with the opportunity to realize additional operational expense savings in 2026. As we move forward. And so these decisions impact RTD's budget, service delivery. Quite naturally, you all have heard me say the money's in the schedule, recognizing that our core business is service delivery and our long-term financial output. So while both efforts may be touching on staffing or the organizational structure, their basis and intentions are fundamentally different. And the two initiatives also differ in their impact and sequencing, because I want to be clear relative to the organizational design and workplace assessment. If in fact the agency did not have a $250 million budget deficit, the optimization of resources and looking at greater efficiencies within one's department falls within the auspices of those leaders. And that's something that would have been happening and has happened in the past with other leaders coming into the organization. So just simply put, I just wanted to say that, you know, the agency's management structure clarifies roles and enhances internal collaboration. So with that, I will yield the floor. Should there be questions?
Yes, let's take that issue first. First of all, I apologize for not sending out the letter to the full Finance Committee. It was drafted last week, and several of us just feel, let's put it this way. I know the discussion of layoffs has been very distressing to many of our staff, and it seems to be on the top of mind. I also am well aware that layoffs is one way to achieve budget savings, but so are some other things, whether it's a 1 or 2 day furlough a month, early retirement program. I know you've already started to freeze programs. Several of us just want to remind everybody that our staff is our greatest resource, and reorganization of the agency is sounds like it's needed. I had a great meeting with Deputy CEO Pena last week, and he explained to me, at least for the programs under his purview, what he's doing. And it sounds to me, when I asked, that at least in his programs, there will be minimal layoffs. It's mostly reorganization for efficiency. So several of us felt it was important to put forth what our thoughts were and our feelings. And we're hoping that we keep up staff morale and we work with our staff to try to find these efficiencies. And with that, there's my 2 cents worth, and go to Director Guchenritter.
Thank you very much, Chair Banker. An incredibly important conversation and topic to address. I guess I'm just trying to understand. I thought we had a dedicated space for this topic. Is it next week?
Yes,
And so I'm
we
just
will
trying
be
to figure out
discussing it
what
in
is,
more
what are we
detail.
hoping to accomplish with this
It's
conversation?
just basically, we wanted to let folks know on the finance committee that we did send a letter asking for consideration of other personnel savings. And we're going to have an in-depth discussion, you're right, on the 17th. But we felt it was important to at least bring it to the attention of the finance committee as to what three of us directors felt was an important issue.
Thank you for explaining.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes. Yes, CEO Johnson.
Thank you very much. Just for clarification purposes, I'd be remiss if I did not state, as it relates to a reduction in force, there has been no fait accompli relative to that. Going back to the question that Director Guchenritter posed, I just wanted to state for the record, because we do have quite naturally staff listening in, and I am a woman of my word in the sense that we as a leadership team have been looking at deficit reduction strategies, and that as relates to reduction in force, that there has not been anything that staff has put forward or shared with all of you in relationship to that. So that's very important to me, because I'm having an all hands meeting next week, and it was intentionally scheduled after the session that we were having with the collective board. So I just wanted to put that out there, because quite naturally, we do have people that tune in, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm playing fast and loose about something that's critically important with this.
And I understand. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that is important.
Thank you.
The point of this is that several of us now just, we have an opinion. You are clearly the CEO. You will be making these decisions. But we wanted to bring it forward to the finance committee, and we will discuss it further on the 17th. So thank you. Director Guzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we did not receive this letter out to the whole committee.
I apologize.
Beginning with this, well, I would like to make sure that we enter it into the meeting minutes as an addendum to this conversation. And you continue to say we, and I don't know who we are, as I have not read the letter. So can you delineate who signed on to this letter?
There were three of us. This was Director Rusha, Director Arcuri, and myself. There were three.
Thank you. I just am seeking clarification to try and understand how this was sent. Was it sent on behalf of the three of you?
Yes.
Not on behalf of the committee, as the rest of us
Correct.
have not seen it. Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that I understand that correctly, because I think that there might have been some presumptions made that were hasty instead of waiting for information to come forth. But I do understand needing to have a conversation about this. Thank you.
Right. And we just thought it was important to bring it forward to the entire finance committee. And we'll leave it there unless there's other comments. But and you can also talk directly to, well, Director Rusha and Director Arcuri and get their thoughts too. And I see Director Rusha has raised her hand. So Director Rusha. You are muted.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So obviously that letter will be shared with folks who haven't seen it. That was just a procedural error. But just for the record, so we're all kind of grounded here. The letter asked RTD leadership to pause layoffs until the board had time to review the budget. Consider cost-saving alternatives before layoffs, just like Chair Banker just mentioned. Protect employee pay when employees are being reassigned. And also to include union representation in the upcoming March 17th board meeting discussion, just recognizing that this conversation about budget and restructuring is going to affect our frontline employees. So I don't know if I've missed anything, but I think that was a pretty good sum of what the letter said. And as Chair Banker noted, we had some concerns, and as GM CEO Johnson noted, there's also been some, I think, misrepresentation in the press, but it was important to us that we, draft a position or letter of concern that was rooted in the facts we had at the time, as well as our values, while also respecting that the board's lane is a little bit different than leadership's lane, and that we have a co-governance, excuse me, model here at RTD. So, Chair Banker, you can correct me if I've overstepped, but I just wanted to provide some of that additional context and content of the letter in the meeting. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
And
that.
oh, I'm sorry, if I may,
Yes.
just one more thing. I
Yes.
also just want to say that I had a chance to speak with our general manager and CEO yesterday morning, and we went over some of the topics in the letter, and I wanted to make sure that I said thank you and just noted to my colleagues that our general manager has been very responsive in these discussions. And so I didn't want, anyway, I just wanted to make sure that I said that so that there was no confusion or that my previous comment wasn't taken in the wrong way. Thanks.
Thank you for adding that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Director Geisinger.
I'm a little confused because you kept saying that you wanted this letter to come to the Finance Committee, but we didn't get
I
it.
apologize. It was my responsibility. I just sent it to several people. I forgot to send it to the Finance Committee, but you'll get it right after the meeting.
Okay, I see these letters come by sometimes that are like based on the facts we know. I find as Director Ruscia was just saying that one of the best things to do is to talk to our GM CEO first and make sure we have all the facts before putting out letters about things that are in the newspaper.
Okay, thank you. Director Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate, I hate to, be in a position where I'm agreeing with Director Guzman so frequently, but I do think that, this is one opportunity where, I would like to see us in the future as much as humanly possible, moving away from bringing, I think we could have gotten this out over email to everybody. And I appreciate the importance of having the topic come up, but I would love to see us do more of the things in all of our meetings over email rather than having to bring them up in meetings, because then we all just start talking for 15 or 20 minutes. And so that phrase, this item could have been, this meeting could have been an email, was going through my head. And that's not a knock on you, Madam Chair, but I do think
thank you so much, Director Nicholson.
I do hope that we can pursue more of doing things electronically, but maybe I'm just being a tech nerd.
No, that's fine. I think the three of us just felt that we wanted to be transparent and tell how three of us feel. We realize there are other feelings and thoughts about this, but it only represents us three. So thank you. Any other comments about this? And then we can go on to the second item, which has to do with payments made to the concessionaire for A, B, and G lines. CEO Johnson, do you want to discuss that? We did receive your email a few days ago. Thank you for a written explanation and background on that particular issue. But if you would like to discuss that, that would be great here too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Banker. I appreciate that. Once again, want to take this opportunity because oftentimes as we see things in the media, I believe, the intent may have been a certain way, but the impact was different. So as it relates to the concessionaire agreement that, as you know, spawned from a P3, I just want to take the opportunity to provide context and history regarding the June 2026 proposed service changes, recognizing that there has been a lot of discussion since that appeared as a discussion item before the Operations, Safety, and Security Committee on February 6th. And not only have there been questions from all of you, stakeholder questions and media inquiries relative to the increased frequencies on the B and G commuter rail lines. And I do appreciate that this body is engaged on that front and have raised some thoughtful questions on this topic. And I have had the opportunity to have several one-on-one conversations with a vast majority of you. So I believe it's important to first note that the structure of RTD's public-private partnership with Denver Transit Partners began in 2010 and runs through 2044. So under this agreement, RTD owns the 66 rail cars, which constitute 33 married pairs, and the infrastructure for the A, B, and G lines. And the agency leases those assets back to the Denver Transit Partners, and its operating arm, which is Denver Transit Operators. So you have the partners and you have the operators. And DTO, being the operators, are responsible for designing, or both of them, designing, building, financing, operating, and maintaining the system. Just for everyone's edification, RTD retains oversight responsibility as the railroad of record with the Federal Railroad Administration. And then additionally, I'm going to take this opportunity because I received some questions today, and recognizing that you, Madam Chair, asked me to present on this topic, I'm going to just address those questions which I received today. I had questions posed relative to what the spare ratio is for commuter rail vehicles, which is 10% to maintain service continuity, meaning that 10% more vehicles are available for operation that are utilized for daily pullout. And this is due to the fact that 10% includes vehicles that are on short-term holds for routine maintenance, and those that are on longer-term holds necessitated by additional needed repairs, or there could have been an instance where a car is pulled out of service. It could be for biohazards, and it runs the gamut. So said another way, RTD owns sufficient number of commuter rail vehicles to meet all daily commuter rail customer demands, and staff is not aware of a single commuter rail trip during which service was denied to a customer due to overcrowding on board a vehicle. So going back to the agreement, I want to say that RTD pays DTP through monthly service payments that cover operations and maintenance, repayment of the project's private financing, and investor returns. These payments are based on certain performance metrics such as vehicle availability, on-time performance, and station availability. The payments are not, however, based on ridership fares or the amount of service operated. I want to state that because I've received questions, in relationship to our other contracted service. This is not like our rubber tire fleet service that's contracted out to a third party. This is a P3. So keeping in mind when we're talking about the payments, however, are not based on ridership fares or the amount of service operated, whether a line runs every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes does not necessarily change the payment under the contract or the concessionaire agreement. And there are many other costs associated with RTD's agreement with DTO, DTP factored into each payment, in addition to the cost of delivering service. The structure becomes especially relevant when looking back at service reductions during the pandemic. So it is my understanding, as I was not here in April of 2020, RTD reduced service levels across the system, including on the B&G lines, due to operator shortages and lower demand. At the same time, DTP and Allied Universal, that actually happens to provide the second crew member, because we need to ensure that there's a second crew member on commuter rail as required by the Federal Railroad Administration with a Class 3 railroad. We're also experiencing similar workforce shortages. RTD requested frequencies to align with available staffing and customer utilization. Those adjustments did not alter the payment structure. In 2023, vehicles were temporarily relocated from the B&G lines to support higher weekend demand on the A line. That change was implemented in January of 2024 and also had no effect on RTD's payments. So that brings us to January 2026. As part of the agency's tri-annual service change process, RTD issued notice to DTP to restore the frequencies originally envisioned for the B&G lines. As a result of this change, the number of cars per consist may be reduced on A-trip lines. That said, I must reiterate that the current capacity of commuter rail vehicles for all lines is sufficient to meet current daily ridership demands. DTP is able to make the adjustments requested in January 2026, which will be, implemented as we go forward through the process of our service change, contingent upon the Operations and Safety Security Committee's deliberations tomorrow, and then we'll go forward to the full board if in fact they decided to approve said proposed changes. It's without added cost because of how it manages internal resources. Train length, which is analogous with the CONSIS, that's a term used in railroading, vehicle deployments and maintenance. As I indicated, I have received several director inquiries, and one of those has been whether RTD can or should seek reimbursement for the period of reduced service. Once again, because of the nature of the concessionaire agreement and of public-private partnerships in general, monthly service payment invoices do not reflect all costs associated with the P3 agreement. RTD in agreement with DTO DTP includes cost of design, once again, build, finance, operate, and maintain the commuter rail network, and higher dollar upfront costs associated with certain elements of the agreement are spread over its 34-year duration. To put a finer point on it, P3 agreements for transit service, such as the Eagle P3 with DTO DTP, remain relatively rare, and there are no standardized industry practices related to contract relationships between public transit agencies and private operators. I'm pointing this out is because I did receive an inquiry from another board member asking this. This is not your traditional third-party contracted service type arrangement, considering that this was a design, finance, operate, build, and maintain situation. And as I said, should the OSS committee approve these proposed changes tomorrow on March 11th and go forward to the full board for its consideration on the 24th, the frequency changes would be implemented in alignment with the May service changes. Sorry, I meant to say June service changes. I'm getting a little tired. And at that time, the G line will return to 15-minute service delivery during key daytime periods, and the B line will return to 30-minute peak period service. And these changes mark a positive step in restoring service levels for customers, and they do so within the existing structure of RTD's long-term P3 agreement. So with that, that concludes my remarks. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you for reporting on that and providing some additional information with regard to the concessionaire contract. The only other thing that I would like to mention is that, when you're reading these things in the Denver Post, and the board didn't have any backup information either before the article or even after the article until yesterday. I would just urge our management team to brief us and let us know what's going on. And so gave us the opportunity tonight. So thank you very much for the information. I appreciate that. And I see Director Nicholson has got his hand up. So Director Nicholson, do you have comments or questions?
I do. And I apologize for my camera being off. It literally crashed during the middle of the meeting. I looked over at the screen and I wasn't moving anymore. And then, so I apologize for that not working. Jim C.O. Johnson, you already answered my question about the spare ratio. I was wondering, you said, we don't essentially pay more depending upon, or pay less depending upon how much service is offered. Presumably there are some amount of service guarantees within there. Otherwise, they could run half the service that they run right now, and we would still pay them the same amount of money. So maybe you can help me understand, first off, what you meant by it's not dependent on the amount of service that we run. And I do have like 3 or 4 more questions.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, CEO.
Yes, thank you. So perhaps I shouldn't have said that so loosely. What I mean is by virtue of what is prescribed within the concessionaire agreement, since it was the design, finance, operate, maintain, build, there are certain parameters relative to service. And quite naturally, through the engagement with our staff relative to what is required, what is required as it relates to our transit utilization and what we foresee in reference to customer demand, we're talking in terms of what is deployed, i.e. to the point that we have 66 rail cars and we're delivering various services going forward. We know what those cars are because RTD owns those and leases them back. So when I talked about the service parameters, if in fact RTD saw it sufficient relative to adjusting the length of a consist on the G line versus the A line, then that would be within the parameter of this organization to decide. And then more to the point, recognizing that RTD directly operates the inline, those vehicles are still the same vehicles, i.e. the 66 cars, the 33 married pairs that are deployed. So a determination could be made if there was a need whereby we wanted to bolster service on another line. So that's what I meant relative to the service parameters. Thank you.
Director Nicholson, do you have another follow-up question or are you satisfied?
I have a few, but if other directors want to go first, I can.
Okay, thank you. Director Guzman.
So I want to be careful approaching this. I'm the chair of the audit committee this year. I've reached out to all the members of the audit committee, and the audit committee will be taking up an investigation into this matter. We are intending to meet on the 12th of March to have further discussion on it. So I'm going to refrain from any further conversation in this committee about that matter. I understand the desire and what is being said here, but also the appropriate place for the majority of this conversation and investigation into it actually would be under the purview of the internal audit committee. I just want to put that on the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think that's important information. And I wasn't quite sure if anything further was going to happen, but you clarified that. So thank you for taking that up in audit. Director Ruscia. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Director Ruscia.
Oh, is it me or GMCO Johnson? I think she had her hand up.
Sorry, I think
Who's
it's
on
getting
first?
late for all of us, right? CEO Johnson, did you want to respond to that?
I just wanted to
apologize.
clarify something. The term investigation was used. The audit committee does not do investigations. They're going to audit this issue in particular relative to where we sit. So I just wanted to state that for the record.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ruscia, I'm sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. I interrupted myself. Thank you, Madam Chair. So speaking of things that could have been a memo, this was a memo. And I got a lot of valuable information from our general manager. I still have a few questions which I sent as a follow-up, but I am just wondering, because we're referencing a memo in committee, is this something, I'm the second person to reference it at least, is this something that needs to be put in our packet? Or if not, I was just thinking, like, if there is some misinformation out there, while we can't chase every story, I think this is big enough that any misperception of what happened is damaging. So I just want to put out there, maybe something for our general manager, like, is there anything we can do to kind of correct the record, as far as the situation is concerned?
Yes.
And I just want to, like, I'm not trying to manage how we do our communications. I was just sharing from quasi outsider perspective how this looks and what I'm hearing. And I know things the public does not know, and what I know is not executive privilege. That's what I'm just trying to kind of get at. Thank you.
Okay. CEO Johnson, did you want to respond to that? I thought I saw your hand up for a brief moment.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And in reference to correcting the record, we have reached out on several occasions to the media, but in particular as it relates to this, we wrote an article yesterday, the News Stop story that we posted to our channels, setting the record straight relative to what that is. I provided correspondence to you all before before that was posted, to ensure that you all knew what was forthcoming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Gushenritter.
Thank you very much, Chair Banker. I think this is a very important topic, but I tend to agree with Director Guzman that it feels like a reach that we're talking about this in finance and planning. I think it deserves breadth and conversation, but I'm not sure. I don't agree that right now is the right forum. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that comment. I think some of us had felt, myself definitely, that we needed some sort of written response. So the reason why it's in finance is clearly because if there's any kind of remedial action, it seems to me it would be financial. I don't know what the cost of this was to the agency. Could we have started this frequent service 2 years ago? And, so we've lost time increasing service versus how much money we have paid DTO. So that's the reason why it's in finance, is because of the dollars. Quite frankly, that's the bottom line for me, is the dollars, and of course the service that was not provided to our customers. So there's some rationale. Let's see, Director Nicholson, do you have more comments? Any comment?
Yeah, I do actually.
Thank you. Go.
And thank you. And I apologize again about the camera. I think, to borrow from Director Gutenritter, the question that, sort of has been on my mind since this was announced that it was coming back is, why wasn't it brought back 2 years ago? I understand that we are, that there was the challenge of the having the additional rail cars being allocated to the A line. If we've been trying to restore service on the A line restore ridership on the A line for the last 3 years, I still don't understand, and the people I've spoken to over the last couple of weeks don't understand why it took 3 years to bring back this service if we are going to be in a place now where the move of those cars is not going to impact the service we're operating on the A line. It's not like we've been seeing massive declines in ridership on the A line such that suddenly we have the space to carry people on the A line. We don't need the extra rail cars. So it's still, I understand our conversation, I understand the email, but something still doesn't compute for me. And I think it's really important that we have this conversation in public, and I'm glad that we're having it today, because this raised a lot with a ton of people. And so I don't understand it in the way that I feel like I need to, because if it was a problem in 2023, why is it not a problem now? Why can we bring it back now if we couldn't have brought it back 2 years ago? Why couldn't we have made this change in 2024? Is my question.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a question that many of us have. Do you have any other comments, any other questions, Director Nicholson?
No, that's the primary one.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming our audit chair has probably heard your comments, and I assume some of those issues or questions will be brought to the audit committee. So thank you for sharing. Okay, folks. Oh, Director.
Really quickly.
Yes.
Thank you. The audit committee packet will be posted before our meeting. We will have that meeting and discuss it further. Appropriate scope will be taken care of. All of that will be handled in the audit committee, where it is an appropriate place to look into the matter further. And results are always shared with the board. So, you're welcome to go and have that. It should be a short meeting to address this issue and add it to the audit and give it the due time that it's needed. I don't anticipate that being a longer conversation than what we had here tonight, because we still need to do the audit and before we can provide answers, and that's the appropriate order of operations to get this done. So just anticipate that coming back forward to the board at an appropriate time. And I just want to make sure that you all understand I've received communication from multiples of you, and that information was discussed immediately with our chief audit executive, who is a professional and does this with us all the time. Again, every member of the audit committee has been in favor of doing this since this particular information was shared. And we will look into it and we will have a determination to bring forward to you. So that's all I can say about that until we do more work in the audit committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I may actually tune in to your audit committee. Any other issues under other matters? Anything that you'd like to share? Director Rusha.
Thank you. Very quick. And I will go ahead and own it if this was expressed last fall and I missed it. Do we have a set dates this year for free fares days? That would be a budget issue, so I just want to know if staff could address
CEO
that.
Johnson, do you know the answer to that question?
Yes, as it relates to where we sit, we've already had the first one, which was Transit Equity Day that took place in February. We traditionally have zero fare for the election when they're general primaries. And so that's in the first Tuesday in November. And then we do a partnership with Molson Coors, whereby some aspect of the fares are covered, and that would be New Year's Eve.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, finance team? Okay, so the next Finance and Planning Committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 7th. At that meeting, we will have an update from the CU Leeds School of Business with regard to sales tax and use tax forecasting. We will also be discussing electronic fare collection systems, contract extension, and federal, state, and local grant applications and funding opportunities. Oh, and also a reminder to Director Rusha and Director Arcuri, if you could please take a look at our fiscal policies, and if you see any amendments or changes, if you could have them ready for the next committee meeting, that would be great. And seeing no other discussion, hopefully that's true. Let me know. This is it. Seeing no other discussion, the meeting is adjourned at 8:32. So thank you all for your patience and your participation. And we look forward to the next meeting. So good night. Travel safely if you're